The paper trembled in her fingers like a dying bird. Countess Sophia Vereskaya stood motionless by the window of her Parisian boudoir, reading the words for the third time. The handwriting was elegant, almost beautiful. The message was poison. 50,000 francs, 48 hours, or the letter reaches Vienna. She could smell the lilies rotting in the crystal vase beside her. Sweet decay, how fitting. The cheap paper felt rough against her silk gloves, so different from the perfumed stationery she used for her own correspondence. Baron von Klaus had not bothered with pretense. Sophia walked to the fireplace. The flames danced orange and gold, hungry. She fed them the ultimatum and watched it curl into black lace, then collapse into ash on the white marble hearth. Burning his words changed nothing. The Baron still had her letter. That foolish, innocent letter she had written to Count Esterhazy after his wife passed away. "My heart has always belonged only to you," she had meant as a childhood friend. The full sentence made that clear, but torn from context, those 8 words transformed a grieving widow's consolation into a confession of adultery. Her reputation, her standing in society, her daughter's marriage prospects, all of it reduced to kindling for a blackmailer's fire. "Madame," her maid Marta appeared in the doorway, face pale as fresh snow. "The carriage is ready, but there is something you must know." Sophia turned. The grandfather clock behind her showed 20 past 7. The Orient Express departed at 8. She had no time for hesitation. "Speak quickly." "The Baron. He takes the same train tonight, to Vienna." Of course he did. He wanted to watch her squirm, to savor her desperation across white tablecloths and crystal champagne flutes. "There is more, madame. He travels with a lady." Marta's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Madame Irene Levasseur." The name struck Sophia like a slap across the face. Irene, her dearest friend, her confidant. The only soul in Paris to whom she had revealed the letter's existence, weeping into her handkerchief one autumn afternoon a year ago. Sophia gripped the mantelpiece. The marble felt cold through her gloves, solid and unforgiving. "Ready my traveling case," she said, her voice steady as stone. "The burgundy dress for dinner, and the pearls." If she must walk into battle, she would do so armored in silk and dignity. The rain began as her carriage lurched through the narrow streets of Paris. Icy needles pelted the windows, and Sophia pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the city blur past. Gaslight reflections swam on wet cobblestones like drowning stars. The wheels clattered over the uneven road, each jolt sending her heart higher into her throat. She calculated distances, minutes, possibilities. The train would not wait. The Baron would not relent. And Irene, sweet Irene with her tinkling laugh and sympathetic eyes, had sold her for whatever price a man like von Klaus could offer. "Faster," Sophia commanded the driver. "The horses cannot, madame. The streets are rivers." She closed her eyes and saw her late husband's face. Count Veresky had been a gentleman, devoted and quiet. He had loved her in his measured way, and she had been a faithful wife for 19 years. Now his memory would be dragged through scandal sheets, his widow painted as a woman of loose virtue, because she had written words of comfort to a grieving friend, because she had trusted Irene. The Gare de l'Est loomed through the rain like a cathedral of iron and glass. Steam billowed from beneath the great arched roof, and whistles pierced the damp air. Sophia thrust coins at the driver without counting them, and ran. Her heels slipped on wet stone, her skirts tangled around her ankles. The platform stretched impossibly long, and at its end, the gleaming carriages of the Orient Express waited like promises about to be broken. A whistle shrieked. Final boarding! The conductor was already lifting the step when Sophia reached the last carriage. He saw her face, her outstretched hand, and hesitated just long enough for her to grasp the brass railing and pull herself aboard. The train lurched forward. She stumbled against the mahogany paneling of the corridor, gasping for breath, her hair loosened from its pins and tumbling across her shoulders. She had made it. Then she looked up, and her blood turned to winter. At the far end of the corridor stood Baron Friedrich von Klaus, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in evening black. He held a crystal flute of champagne, and when he saw her, he raised it in a mock toast. His smile was the smile of a cat watching a mouse enter its parlor. Behind him, a door opened. A woman emerged in a gown of crimson silk, the color of fresh wounds. Irène Levasseur draped her hand possessively over the Baron's shoulder and fixed Sophia with eyes full of ancient venom, dressed in modern courtesy. The train picked up speed. Rain lashed the windows. Sophia straightened her spine. She smoothed her wet hair with trembling fingers and lifted her chin. The Baron's lips moved without sound. She read them clearly across the swaying corridor. 48 hours, Countess. Irene blew her a kiss, delicate and poisonous as arsenic in honey. The wheels beneath them sang their iron song, carrying all three toward Vienna, toward ruin or redemption. Sophia did not yet know which. But as she watched her enemies disappear into the salon car, one thought crystallized in her mind like frost on glass. They expected her to cower, to beg, to pay. They had badly miscalculated. The invitation arrived on paper soaked in violet perfume. Sophia recognized the scent immediately. She had given Irene that fragrance last Christmas, wrapped in silver ribbon with genuine affection. Now the delicate purple script curled across the card like a serpent through flowers. Dinner at 8. The restaurant carriage. We have so much to discuss. No signature. None was needed. Sophia sat on the plum velvet seat of her compartment, turning the card between her fingers. The paper felt expensive, thick and creamy. Irene always did appreciate fine things. Other people's fine things, preferably. An hour had passed since boarding. The rain had stopped, and the French countryside rolled past her window in shades of gray and silver. Bare trees reached toward a colorless sky like the hands of drowning men. She should refuse. Lock her door and spend the journey planning her defense, but hiding would signal weakness, and weakness was blood in shark-infested waters. Sophia rose and examined herself in the small mirror above the washstand. Her hair had dried in wild waves. Her eyes were shadowed, but her back was straight and her jaw was set. She changed into the burgundy dress Marta had packed. The silk whispered against her skin, cool as a conspirator's promise. She fastened her mother's pearls around her throat. They gleamed soft and pure, a shield of innocence against whatever accusations the evening would bring. The corridor swayed gently as she made her way toward the restaurant carriage. Gas lamps flickered in brass sconces, casting dancing shadows on the wood-paneled walls. Other passengers nodded politely as she passed. An elderly gentleman in military decorations. A young woman with frightened eyes clutching a rosary. A child pressed against the window, counting telegraph poles. None of them knew that a countess walked among them with her honor balanced on a knife's edge. The restaurant carriage took her breath away despite everything. Crystal chandeliers hung from the curved ceiling, their prisms scattering candlelight into tiny rainbows. White linen tablecloths gleamed like fresh snow. Silver cutlery sparkled beside porcelain plates edged in gold. The scent of roasted duck and red wine mingled with expensive perfumes and Cuban cigars. Baron von Klaus occupied the central table like a king holding court. He rose as Sophia entered, executing a bow so perfect it bordered on mockery. His evening coat fit without a wrinkle. His silver hair was pomaded to a mirror shine. Everything about him proclaimed wealth, breeding, and absolute confidence. "Countess Vereshchaya, what an unexpected pleasure!" His voice carried across the carriage. Heads turned. Sophia felt curious eyes examining her like specimen under glass. "Baron von Klaus, the pleasure is entirely yours." "I am certain." She took the empty seat across from him without waiting for invitation. A small victory, but she would claim every inch. Irene sat to the Baron's right, draped in emerald silk that matched her eyes. She smiled, and Sophia remembered afternoons of shared confidences, whispered secrets, tears dried on borrowed handkerchiefs. All of it false. All of it poison wrapped in friendship's clothing. "Darling Sophia, you look exhausted. The journey must be terribly trying for someone of your delicate constitution." The knife slipped in so smoothly Sophia almost missed the wound. "Travel agrees with me wonderfully, Irene. It is betrayal that I find fatiguing." Irene's smile flickered but held. Two other passengers shared the table. An elderly English woman with iron-gray hair and diamonds the size of quail eggs introduced herself as the Countess of Marlborough. Her nephew, a pale young man named Edward, nodded nervously and immediately buried his face in the wine list. "Countess Vereshchaya," the Englishwoman said, examining Sophia with shrewd blue eyes. "The name is familiar. Your late husband served with my brother in the Crimea, did he not?" "He did, Lady Marlborough. They remained correspondents until my husband's passing." "A fine man, a gentleman of the old school." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Lady Marlborough had established Sophia's credentials with the efficiency of a general deploying troops. The Baron's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Dinner proceeded like a military campaign conducted with fish forks and pleasant conversation. The Baron discussed Viennese society. Irene mentioned mutual acquaintances with strategic precision, each name a reminder of how thoroughly she could spread her poison through Sophia's social circles. Sophia parried and deflected, revealing nothing, conceding nothing. Then Irene leaned forward, eyes bright with malice disguised as concern. "Sophia, dear, I heard the most curious rumor before we departed Paris. Something about Count Esterhazy and a letter. Poor man, losing his wife so suddenly. One hopes his friends offered proper comfort during such trying times." The restaurant carriage seemed to contract around Sophia. The chandelier light felt suddenly harsh, exposing. "I wrote to express condolences, as any civilized person would," My letter was brief and appropriate. Of course it was, though I understand some letters can be so easily misinterpreted. Taken out of context, even the most innocent words might seem rather scandalous. Sophia set down her fork with deliberate precision. How fortunate that we live in an age of reasonable people who examine evidence thoroughly before rushing to judgment. She smiled directly into Irene's eyes. And how unfortunate for those who peddle lies. The truth has a way of revealing itself eventually, like poison in a pretty bottle. Sooner or later, someone always reads the label. Lady Marlborough coughed delicately into her napkin. Edward knocked over his wineglass. The Baron dabbed his lips with studied casualness, but his eyes had turned cold as winter steel. Sophia excused herself before dessert arrived. The observation platform at the rear of the carriage offered darkness and solitude. She gripped the brass railing and breathed deeply, filling her lungs with cold night air. The French countryside rushed past invisible beneath a moonless sky. Distant village lights flickered like fallen stars. She had survived the first battle, but the war had barely begun. Footsteps approached behind her. The scent of violet perfume preceded the voice. "Quite a performance," Irene murmured, stepping onto the platform. "You always did know how to command a room." Sophia did not turn. "What do you want?" "What I have always wanted. What should have been mine." Irene moved to stand beside her, gripping the railing. Without the audience, her mask slipped, her beautiful face contorted with something raw and hungry. "You had everything, Sophia. The title, the fortune, the husband who adored you. Every door opened at your approach, every gentleman bowed, every lady envied. And I stood in your shadow for 15 years, smiling and applauding and choking on my own jealousy. I thought we were friends." "Friends?" Irene laughed, harsh as broken glass. "Friends share equally. We never shared anything equally. Now it is my turn." The train swayed around a curve. Cold wind bit Sophia's cheeks, carrying the scent of coal smoke and wet earth. "The Baron will marry me after this is finished," Irene continued. "After your money fills his pockets and your reputation lies in ruins." He promised. "A title, a fortune, a future. Everything you took for granted, everything I deserved." "You betrayed me for a blackmailer's promise?" "I betrayed you for justice." Sophia finally turned. In the faint glow from the carriage windows, Irene's face looked almost inhuman, a mask of beauty stretched over bottomless spite. "There is no justice in what you are doing, only cruelty dressed in self-righteousness. Call it what you like. The result will be the same." Irene straightened her emerald skirts and smiled, sweet as spoiled honey. "Enjoy the rest of your journey, Countess. These may be your last days of freedom." She disappeared back into the warmth of the carriage, leaving Sophia alone with the rushing darkness. The cold seeped through her silk dress, through her skin, into her bones. She stood motionless, watching the night swallow mile after mile of track. Hatred was a strange thing. It could wear a friend's face for 15 years without ever showing its true features. Finally, Sophia returned to her compartment. She walked slowly, composing herself with each step. rebuilding the armor that Irene's words had cracked. As she reached her door, she noticed the compartment beside hers stood slightly ajar. Lamplight spilled through the gap, warm and golden. A man sat at the small writing desk, his back partially turned. Silver threaded his dark hair at the temples. His shoulders were broad beneath a well-cut gray coat. On the desk before him lay photographs, documents, newspaper clippings. And one photograph showed Sophia herself. She recognized it. A portrait taken 3 years ago during the season in Vienna. She wore her wedding pearls and a gown of ice blue satin. The man raised his head as though sensing her gaze. He turned, and their eyes met through the narrow opening. He did not look surprised. He did not look embarrassed. He smiled. 2 hours past midnight, Sophia crept from her compartment like a ghost in burgundy silk. The corridor stretched before her, empty and dim. Gas lamps had been lowered to faint blue flames that cast more shadow than light. The train swayed gently, a rhythm of iron wheels against iron rails, and somewhere in the darkness, a loose fitting rattled like chattering teeth. She had spent hours lying awake, staring at the ceiling of her compartment, planning. The conductor had been expensive to bribe. 50 francs for information that should have cost nothing. But desperation made poor bargaining power. Carriage 3, compartment 5. The Baron's lair. Sophia moved slowly, testing each step before committing her weight. The carpet muffled her footfalls, but the wooden floor beneath creaked treacherously in places. She counted doors as she passed. 1, 2. The connecting passage between carriages groaned as she crossed it, cold air rushing up through gaps in the metal plates. 3, 4. Compartment 5 stood silent, its polished brass number gleaming dully in the blue gaslight. She pressed her ear against the door. Nothing. No movement, no breathing, no rustle of bedsheets. The Baron and Irene must still be in the salon carriage. She had seen them there an hour ago, playing cards with a group of German industrialists, their laughter carrying through the corridors like the cawing of well-dressed crows. The lock yielded to a hairpin with surprising ease. Sophia's hands trembled as she worked, but her fingers remembered skills learned long ago during summers at her grandmother's country estate, where locked doors had been challenges rather than barriers. The door swung inward without a sound. She slipped inside and closed it behind her, heart hammering against her ribs. Darkness engulfed her. Heavy curtains blocked the windows, sealing out even starlight. The compartment smelled of expensive cologne, cigar smoke, and something else, something sharp and chemical that she could not identify. Sophia waited for her eyes to adjust. Gradually, shapes emerged from the blackness. A narrow bed, neatly made. A writing desk cluttered with papers. A leather traveling case standing open on the luggage rack. She had perhaps 20 minutes, perhaps less. Moving by touch as much as sight, Sophia began her search. The writing desk yielded nothing but train schedules and a half-written letter to someone named Heinrich about stock prices. The bedside table held a Bible that looked never opened and a silver flask that smelled of brandy. The traveling case. She lifted it down carefully, wincing at its weight. The brass clasps clicked open under her fingers. Inside, she found shirts folded with military precision, cravats arranged by color, a shaving kit with mother-of-pearl handles. and beneath it all, a leather portfolio stuffed with documents. Sophia's breath caught. She carried the portfolio to the window and parted the curtain just enough to admit a sliver of moonlight. Names leaped out at her from the pages. Count Waldstein of Prague, Baroness Ehrlich of Munich, a shipping magnate from Hamburg, a cardinal from Rome. Each file contained letters, photographs, financial records. Each file represented a life held hostage by Baron von Klaus. He was not merely a blackmailer. He was an industry. Sophia flipped through the files with increasing desperation. Where was her letter? It had to be here, had to be among these trophies of human misery. But her name did not appear. Her photograph was absent. Her letter, the letter that could destroy everything she had built, was nowhere in the Baron's collection. A notation in the final file caught her eye. A list of initials with numbers beside them. V.R. 20,000 francs. The date was 3 months ago. V.R. Victor Renard? The mysterious man in the neighboring compartment? The one who had her photograph on his desk? Footsteps in the corridor. Sophia froze, blood turning to ice water. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by voices. The Baron's cultured drawl. Iran's tinkling laugh. They were returning. They were almost at the door. She shoved the portfolio back into the case, but there was no time to arrange the contents properly, no time to reposition the luggage, no time for anything except escape. The connecting door. Every compartment on the Orient Express connected to its neighbor through an interior door, normally locked from both sides. Sophia lunged for it, twisting the handle with desperate force. It gave. She tumbled through into darkness just as the corridor door of the Baron's compartment began to open. She pulled the connecting door shut behind her and pressed her back against it, clamping both hands over her mouth to silence her ragged breathing. "Strange," the Baron's voice came muffled through the wood. "I could swear I left the curtains closed." "You were drinking, darling." Iren's reply carried a note of impatience. "Come to bed." "Something feels wrong. The case. It has been moved." "Friedrich, it is nearly 3 in the morning. If you suspect thieves, summon the conductor in daylight. Right now, I want sleep." A pause. Then the Baron grunted agreement, and Sophia heard the sounds of preparation for bed. Water pouring into a basin, shoes dropping to the floor, the rustle of clothing. She did not dare move, did not dare breathe. Minutes stretched into eternities. Then hands seized her from behind. Sophia opened her mouth to scream, but a palm clamped over her lips with iron strength. A man's voice whispered directly into her ear, so close you could feel warm breath on her neck. "Silence, unless you want the Baron to find you here." The hands turned her slowly, carefully, keeping one palm firmly over her mouth. In the darkness she could make out only shadows of a face, but she recognized the voice. The man from the neighboring compartment. The man with her photograph. He released her mouth but kept his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. "Through here," he breathed, quietly. He guided her across the darkened space to another door, this one opening into his own compartment. Faint lamplight spilled across a writing desk covered in documents. The photograph of Sophia lay among them, her own face staring up at her with an expression she barely recognized. The man closed the door and turned to face her. Now she could see him clearly. Tall, perhaps 50 years old, with silver threading through dark hair at the temples. His face was handsome in a weathered way, marked by lines that suggested both laughter and grief. His eyes were gray as winter seas, watchful and intelligent. "Countess Vereshchaya," he said softly, "you have just committed burglary. Fortunately for you, so have I." "Who are you?" "My name is Victor Renard. I am, among other things, a private investigator." He gestured to the documents spread across his desk. Newspaper clippings, court records, death certificates. "I have spent 3 months building a case against Baron von Klaus. He destroyed my client's brother with his blackmail schemes. The young man took his own life rather than face exposure. My client wants justice, and I intend to deliver it." Sophia's mind raced. The initials in the Baron's notebook, "V.R." 20,000 francs. "You work for him," she said. "I saw your name in his accounts." Victor's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. "You found the ledger? Impressive." "Yes, 3 months ago the Baron hired me to investigate several potential victims. You were among them, Countess." Her blood turned cold. "But I discovered something in my research," Victor continued. "The Baron's methods, his cruelty, the lives he has shattered without remorse. And I learned what he did to Stefan Ehrlich, my client's brother. A young man of 19 who made one foolish mistake and paid with his life. He picked up a newspaper clipping. Even in the dim light, Sophia could read the headline: "Young aristocrat found dead in Vienna hotel." "I changed sides," Victor said simply. "Whatever the Baron paid me, my conscience costs more." "How can I believe you?" "You cannot. Not yet. But consider this, Countess. I could have let the Baron find you in his compartment just now. I could have exposed you as a thief and watched you dragged from this train in disgrace. Instead, I saved you." He set down the clipping and met her eyes directly. "You did not find your letter in his luggage." It was not a question. "No," Sophia admitted. "It was not there." "Because he does not carry such valuable leverage on his person. It is somewhere safe, somewhere beyond your reach. But I have spent months studying this man, his habits, his weaknesses." Victor smiled. And for the first time, Sophia saw something almost warm in those gray eyes. "The Baron has one fatal flaw, Countess. He cannot resist a gamble. He believes himself invincible at cards, and he will wager anything when his blood is up, anything at all." "What are you suggesting?" "An alliance. My resources, your access to society. Together, we might accomplish what neither could manage alone." Sophia studied his face in the lamplight, the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw, the steadiness of his gaze. She had trusted once before, and that trust had brought her to this desperate midnight search. But what choice remained? "Tell me," she said slowly, "everything you know about the Baron." Victor pulled a chair forward and gestured for her to sit. "We have," he said, "much to discuss, and only 36 hours until Vienna." Outside the window, the darkness rushed past in an endless stream. The train carried them forward through the night, toward a destination that would mean either salvation or ruin. Morning light revealed a landscape transformed into silver and white. The train had crossed into Germany during the night, and frost painted every surface beyond the windows. Fields lay beneath crystalline blankets. Bare trees wore sleeves of ice that caught the pale sun and scattered it into diamonds. Sophia had not slept. She sat in Victor's compartment, nursing cold coffee, turning the stolen notebook in her hands. The leather cover felt worn beneath her fingers, soft as old sin. "VR," she said again. 20,000 francs. 3 months ago. Victor stood by the window, watching the frozen countryside slide past. "I have already explained." "You have offered an explanation. That is not the same thing." He turned. In the harsh morning light, she could see exhaustion etched into his features. Whatever game he played, it was costing him sleep as well. "What would convince you, Countess?" "Nothing." "I cannot afford to be convinced. I can only afford to be practical." She set down the notebook and met his eyes directly. "For now, our interests align. That will have to suffice." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You would have made an excellent diplomat." "I was married to one for 19 years. Some skills transfer." The train began to slow. Station signs flickered past the window, announcing their approach to Stuttgart. 15 minutes for coal and water. 15 minutes of fresh danger. "The Baron will be watching the platform," Victor said. "He suspects something after last night. Stay in your compartment until we depart." Sophia shook her head. "Hiding will only confirm his suspicions. I must appear unconcerned, above suspicion." "That is a considerable risk." "My entire life is a considerable risk at this moment." She rose and smoothed her skirts. The burgundy silk was wrinkled from her sleepless night, but it would have to serve. "Besides, I need air." "This compartment smells of conspiracy." "And sandalwood tobacco," Victor added dryly. "My one vice." "One? How admirably restrained." She left him standing by the window, his expression unreadable. The platform at Stuttgart bustled with activity. Porters hauled luggage, vendors hawked newspapers and hot chestnuts. Steam billowed from beneath the locomotive, mixing with the frozen breath of travelers to create a shifting veil of white. Sophia walked slowly along the platform, her fur muff warming her hands. The cold bit at her cheeks and nose, sharp and clean after the stale air of the train. She bought a newspaper she would not read and a bag of roasted almonds she would not eat. Normal activities, innocent activities. Nothing to see here. "Countess Veriskaya." The Baron's voice came from directly behind her. She turned without haste, arranging her features into polite neutrality. "Baron von Klaus, taking some air?" He moved to stand beside her, too close for propriety, but not quite close enough for complaint. His cologne invaded her senses, heavy and expensive. "I had trouble sleeping last night," he said. "Strange noises, a feeling of disturbance." "How unfortunate. I slept like a child." "Did you?" His eyes searched her face with uncomfortable intensity. "How enviable. I myself kept imagining intruders, shadows moving where shadows should not be." Sophia selected an almond from her paper bag and placed it delicately between her teeth. "Perhaps you should drink less brandy before bed." Baron. It is known to cause nightmares. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I should install better locks." "On a moving train? How inventive you are." A whistle shrieked. 5 minutes to departure. Sophia nodded politely and turned toward her carriage. The Baron's hand closed around her wrist. His grip was firm, but not painful. A warning rather than an assault. His lips moved close to her ear, breath hot against her chilled skin. "I know you searched my compartment, Countess. I do not yet know what you found, but let me be clear. If you attempt anything like that again, I will send the telegram immediately. Not to Vienna, to every major newspaper in Europe. Your name will be destroyed before this train reaches the Austrian border." He released her and stepped back, all gracious smiles once more. "Do enjoy the rest of your journey." Sophia watched him walk away, her wrist burning where his fingers had pressed. Around her, passengers hurried toward the train. The whistle shrieked again, but she stood motionless on the icy platform, feeling the world contract to a single point of cold fury. He would not win. She would not allow it. The train was moving again by the time she reached the library carriage. Mahogany shelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes in 4 languages. Deep armchairs invited contemplation. A single elderly gentleman dozed in a corner, newspapers spread across his chest like a blanket. Sophia chose a seat by the window and drew out the notebook she had stolen. The Baron knew of her intrusion, but not of her theft. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. She had examined the ledger a dozen times through the sleepless night. Names, initials, amounts, dates. A catalog of misery and extortion stretching back at least 5 years. But one entry still puzzled her. V.R. 20,000 francs 3 months ago. And beneath it, in smaller script, a notation she had initially overlooked. K. 15,000. Same date. K. Not Victor Renard, someone else. Another agent, perhaps. Another player in this shadow game. She turned the pages slowly, looking for patterns. The Baron was methodical in his wickedness. Every victim categorized, every payment recorded, every threat documented with the precision of a bookkeeper tallying accounts. Fascinating reading material for a lady. Sophia's blood froze. She looked up to find Irene standing over her, emerald eyes fixed on the notebook.
"Personal correspondence," Sophia said, closing the cover. "Old letters from my late husband."
"In a leather ledger? How eccentric of Count Varesky." Irene seated herself in the adjacent chair without invitation. Her perfume invaded the space between them. Violet sweetness turned cloying. "The Baron is angry," she said conversationally. "He believes someone entered his compartment last night. He suspects you, of course."
"The Baron suspects everyone. It is his nature."
"True, but in your case his suspicions happen to be correct."
Sophia said nothing. Her fingers tightened on the notebook.
"I would be careful," Irene continued. "Friedrich is not accustomed to being challenged. When his authority is questioned, he tends to react decisively. There was a banker in Prague who tried to resist. He was found floating in the Vltava 2 weeks later. Is that a threat? It is information. What you do with it is your concern." Irene rose and smoothed her emerald skirts with elegant hands. "I merely thought you should understand the nature of your opponent. Friedrich does not play games he intends to lose. And neither, my dear Sophia, do I." She walked away without a backward glance. Sophia sat motionless, the notebook heavy in her lap. Through the window, the German countryside rolled past in shades of gray and white. The sleeping gentleman snored softly in his corner. The train swayed and rattled on its iron path toward Vienna. A banker in Prague, floating in the river. She returned to her compartment and locked the door with trembling hands. Victor's words echoed in her memory. An alliance. Their interests aligned. But how far could she trust a man who had once taken the Baron's money? How far could she trust anyone? The connecting door between their compartments stood solid and silent. She pressed her ear against it, listening. Movement. The scratch of pen on paper. Victor Renard, busy with his own schemes. She needed to know more, needed to understand who she was dealing with, ally or enemy. The notebook yielded nothing new on second examination. V.R. 20,000 francs. K. 15,000. Initials without identity. Then she noticed something she had missed before. In the back pages, tucked between lists of expenses, a series of locations, train stations, hotels, a pattern of movement tracking someone across Europe. Paris, Lyon, Geneva, Munich, Prague. And beside each location, a name, V. Renard. The Baron had not merely hired Victor. He had tracked him, watched him, followed his movements across 4 countries. Why? Sophia rose and paced the narrow confines of her compartment. The train swayed beneath her feet, a constant reminder of time passing, miles consumed, Vienna approaching. She had to know the truth, had to understand what game was being played before she became another piece on someone else's board. Her hand reached for the connecting door. Through the thin wood, Victor's voice carried clearly. He was speaking to someone, but they were alone in his compartment. She had seen no one enter. "Yes, Baron. She trusts me now. The plan proceeds exactly as we discussed." Sophia's heart stopped. She pressed closer to the door, straining to hear. But the voice continued, calm and confident. "By Vienna she will have revealed everything. You will have your 50,000 francs and whatever else you desire. She suspects nothing." The world tilted beneath her feet. She stumbled backward, pressing both hands over her mouth to silence the scream building in her throat. The walls of her compartment seemed to contract, pressing in on her from all sides, surrounded, betrayed, utterly alone. The lie she had overheard demanded confirmation. Sophia spent 3 hours in frozen paralysis, watching shadows lengthen across her compartment walls as the train devoured miles of German countryside. Her mind churned through possibilities like a fever dream. Victor's voice through the thin wood. Those terrible words. By Vienna, she will have revealed everything. But something nagged at her, a detail that refused to settle. The Baron's name. Victor had spoken it clearly, distinctly. Yet the Baron himself was at that moment in the salon carriage, playing cards with a group of Hungarian merchants. Sophia had seen him there, had deliberately walked past the open door to verify his location before retreating to her compartment. How could Victor speak to a man who was not present? Unless Victor had not been speaking to the Baron at all. Sophia rose from her chair with sudden determination. Fear had made her stupid. Panic had clouded her judgment. She had accepted the obvious interpretation without questioning its foundation. The connecting door yielded to her knock within seconds. Victor stood in his shirt sleeves, cravat loosened, papers scattered across every surface of his compartment. His gray eyes registered surprise, then wariness, then something that might have been relief. "Countess, I was beginning to think you had chosen isolation."
I heard you speaking earlier.
She stepped inside without invitation, closing the door behind her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice remained steady.
I heard you mention the Baron. I heard you say that I trust you now, that the plan proceeds.
Victor's expression did not change. He reached past her and turned the lock on the connecting door with deliberate precision. "You heard me rehearsing." "Rehearsing?" "A conversation I intend to have, with someone who will carry my words directly to the Baron's ears." He gestured to the papers spread across his desk. Among them, Sophia recognized the familiar violet stationery of Irene Levasseur. "Madame Levasseur visits me twice daily," Victor continued. "She believes she is seducing information from me. In reality, I am feeding her exactly what I want the Baron to hear."
And what do you want him to hear?
"That you trust me, that you have confided in me, that you are weakening, preparing to pay his price." Sophia studied his face, searching for deception, the lines around his eyes, the set of his mouth, the way his hands rested at his sides, open and unthreatening.
Why would you want him to believe that?
Because a confident enemy makes mistakes. The Baron thinks he controls this situation absolutely. That arrogance will be his undoing. He pulled a chair forward and gestured for her to sit. "I should have warned you about the rehearsals. I apologize. The connecting walls are thin and I have grown careless." Sophia remained standing.
How do I know this is not another layer of deception?
"You do not. You cannot. That is the nature of our situation. But consider the facts, Countess. If I were truly the Baron's agent, why would I have saved you from discovery last night? Why would I share what I know about his methods? Why would I be here alone with you when I could simply deliver you to him gift-wrapped?"
Perhaps you need something from me first.
"I do." Victor's smile was weary but genuine. "I need you to help me destroy him, completely, publicly, in a manner from which he cannot recover." He moved to his desk and extracted a photograph from the scattered papers. A young man, dark-haired, with gentle eyes and a nervous smile. Stefan Ehrlich, 19 years old. The Baron discovered that he had written love letters to another young man at university. A scandal, certainly, a social difficulty, but not a crime, not a death sentence. "The young aristocrat found dead in Vienna. I saw the clipping." Stefan paid the Baron's price 3 times. Each time the demands increased. When his family's money ran out, when there was nothing left to give, the Baron sent copies of the letters to Stefan's father. Victor set down the photograph with careful reverence. The old Count disowned him publicly, called him an abomination, ordered him never to return home. Stefan walked from his father's house to the nearest hotel and swallowed enough laudanum to kill 3 grown men. "And his sister hired you?" "His sister wants justice. I have spent 3 months building a case that will put Friedrich von Klaus in prison for the rest of his miserable life." Sophia finally sat. Her legs had begun to tremble, and she could no longer hide the weakness.
What does this have to do with me?
"Everything." Victor leaned forward, intensity burning in his gray eyes. "The Baron is careful, meticulous. He leaves no evidence that could convict him in a court of law. But he has one weakness, one fatal flaw.
His gambling. You mentioned this before.
More than gambling. His pride. When challenged, when his superiority is questioned, he loses all restraint. He will wager anything to prove his dominance, anything at all.
Including my letter.
Including evidence of his crimes. Letters from victims, financial records, the ledger you already stole. Sophia touched her pocket where the notebook rested, a weight she had carried constantly since that midnight theft.
You want me to challenge him to a card game.
I want you to manipulate him into a card game, a public spectacle where his pride will not allow him to refuse, where the stakes escalate beyond reason, and where he will eventually wager the one thing he believes gives him power over you.
My letter?
Yes.
And if I lose?
You will not lose. Because I have spent 3 months studying how the Baron cheats. The word hung in the air between them like smoke from a pistol shot. Cheats, Sophia repeated. He is brilliant at it. Sleight of hand that would impress a professional conjurer. But every technique has patterns, tells, weaknesses that can be exploited. Victor drew a deck of cards from his desk drawer and spread them across the surface. I can teach you to see what he does, to anticipate his moves, to beat him at his own corrupt game. Sophia stared at the scattered cards. Kings and queens looked up at her with painted indifference. You want me to cheat? I want you to win. The method is a matter of survival, not morality.
Easy words from a man whose reputation is not at stake.
My reputation? Victor laughed bitterly. I was a decorated officer in the Austrian cavalry. I served with honor in 3 campaigns. When I refused to falsify reports that would have covered my commander's incompetence, I was cashiered on fabricated charges. My reputation was destroyed 15 years ago, Countess. What I do now, I do because nothing remains to lose. He gathered the cards and began to shuffle them with practiced elegance. The Baron has taken everything from people like us. Stefan Ehrlich, the banker in Prague, a dozen others whose names fill that ledger you carry. We can stop him, together. Or you can pay his 50,000 francs and pray he does not return for more. He will return for more. Of course he will. Men like Friedrich von Klaus are never satisfied. Today, 50,000 francs. Tomorrow, your daughter's dowry. Next year, your estates. He will bleed you until nothing remains, and then he will destroy you anyway, because cruelty gives him pleasure. Sophia watched his hands move through the cards. Cut, shuffle, bridge, fan. The movements were hypnotic, precise, almost beautiful. When would this game take place? Tomorrow evening, the last night before Vienna. I have already arranged for the salon carriage to host a tournament. High stakes, invitation only. The Baron cannot resist such an opportunity to demonstrate his superiority. And you believe he will wager my letter? I believe that when his pride is sufficiently wounded, when he has lost enough money to feel genuine pain, he will wager anything to recover his losses, including evidence that he should never release from his possession. That is an enormous gamble. Yes, but what alternative remains? Sophia closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she saw her daughter's face. Natasha, 18 years old,
preparing for her first season in Vienna. A world of possibilities awaiting her, a future that would collapse into scandal and shame if the Baron's poison letter reached the wrong hands. "Teach me," she said.
Victor's hands stilled on the cards. "You agree?" "I agree to learn. Tomorrow I will decide whether to play." He nodded slowly and dealt 4 cards face down on the desk. "Watch carefully. The Baron's favorite technique is called the second deal. It appears that he draws from the top of the deck, but in reality he takes the second card while the top remains in place." His fingers moved. The cards seemed to behave normally, naturally, honestly. "Now watch again. Slower this time. See how his right thumb moves?" Hours passed. The train crossed into Austria as night fell across the frozen landscape. Sophia's eyes burned from concentration. Her fingers ached from practice. But gradually, she began to see the invisible architecture of deception. The Baron was a master. But every master had weaknesses, and Sophia Vereskaya had never lost a game she truly needed to win. Candles blazed in silver candelabras throughout the salon carriage. The tournament had drawn every wealthy passenger aboard the Orient Express. German industrialists with diamond stick pins, an Italian count whose family name predated Rome, 2 Russian princes who had already lost considerable sums and now watched from velvet settees, nursing cognac and wounded pride. Lady Marlborough occupied a corner table, her quail-egg diamonds catching the light as she observed the proceedings with keen, blue eyes. Sophia entered at precisely 9 o'clock. She had chosen her armor with deliberate care, a gown of midnight blue velvet that caught the candlelight and transformed it into liquid starlight. Her mother's pearls gleaming at her throat, hair swept up in the style she had worn during her presentation to the Empress, a lifetime ago when she had been young and certain of her place in the world. Conversation faltered as she crossed the carriage. The Baron rose from the central table, surprise flickering behind his mask of courtesy. "Countess Vereskaya, I had not expected you to join us this evening." "Had you not?" Sophia accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "I understood this was a gathering for serious players. Surely you did not imagine I would miss such an opportunity?" Irene watched from her position at the Baron's shoulder. Her emerald eyes narrowed with calculation. "Sophia, darling, I did not know you played cards." "There is much you do not know about me, Irene. That has always been your fundamental error." She took the empty seat across from the Baron without waiting for invitation. The green baize stretched between them like a battlefield. "What stakes do you propose, Countess?" The Baron's voice carried amusement, condescension, absolute certainty of his superiority. "Shall we begin modestly? 500 francs per hand." Gasps rippled through the assembled spectators. 500 francs would support a working family for a year. "Agreeable?" The Baron signaled for fresh cards. "Though I suspect we will not remain modest for long." The first hour passed in careful reconnaissance. Sophia played conservatively, winning some hands, losing others, maintaining her stake within acceptable bounds. She watched the Baron's hands with the attention Victor had taught her. The subtle movement of his right thumb, the way he held the deck fractionally higher when preparing a second deal, the almost imperceptible pause before certain shuffles. He cheated beautifully, elegantly, with the confidence of a man who had never been caught. Victor observed from a corner table, ostensibly engaged in conversation with Edward Marlborough.
But his gray eyes met Sophia's occasionally, brief glances that communicated encouragement. By 11 o'clock, Sophia was down 3,000 francs. The Baron's confidence had swelled visibly. He laughed more freely, ordered more champagne, made expansive gestures that displayed his diamond cufflinks. "Perhaps," he suggested with poisonous courtesy, "the Countess would prefer to retire. The hour grows late, and luck seems determined to favor experience." "Luck has nothing to do with it." Sophia kept her voice light, unconcerned. "You are simply the superior player. For now." "For now?" His eyebrows rose. "You believe the tide will turn?" "I believe that no tide flows in one direction forever." She raised her stake to 1,000 francs per hand. The spectators pressed closer. Even the Russian princes abandoned their cognac to watch. This was no longer a friendly game among traveling companions. This was war, conducted with painted cards. Sophia began to win, not dramatically, not suspiciously, but steadily, hand after hand, her pile of chips growing while the Baron's diminished. She caught his second deals now, anticipated his loaded shuffles, played against his cheating with the precision of a surgeon excising tumors. Sweat appeared on the Baron's forehead. By midnight, Sophia had recovered her losses and won an additional 8,000 francs. The Baron's face had lost its confident glow. His hands, she noticed, had developed a slight tremor. "Perhaps we should pause," Irene suggested, touching his shoulder. "Friedrich, you look tired." "I am not tired." His voice cracked like a whip. "Deal the cards." "Double the stakes," Sophia said quietly. The room fell silent. 2,000 francs per hand, the equivalent of a modest country estate wagered on each turn of the cards. "You cannot afford such stakes, Countess." The Baron's voice dripped contempt. "Your husband's debts are well known." "My husband's debts died with him. My fortune is my own concern." She met his eyes directly, unflinching. "Unless you are afraid." The word hung in the candlelit air like a thrown gauntlet. The Baron's face darkened with fury. Around them, spectators held their breath. Lady Marlborough leaned forward, diamonds blazing. "Deal," the Baron commanded. The next hour stripped away all pretense of civilization. Cards flew across the green baize, chips clattered, fortunes changed hands with each revealed card. Sophia played with cold precision, reading the Baron's tells, countering his cheats, pressing every advantage. By 1 o'clock in the morning, she had won 40,000 francs. The Baron stared at his diminished chips with the expression of a man watching his kingdom burn. "Enough," he said hoarsely. "I concede." "Concede?" Sophia's voice carried to every corner of the silent carriage. "I had hoped for a more sporting contest. After all, we have barely begun." "I have no more cash to wager." "Cash is merely one form of currency." She reached into her evening bag and withdrew the leather notebook. "I believe you recognize this, Baron." His face went white. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter? What matters is that I have it. A complete record of your criminal enterprise. Names, dates, amounts. Enough evidence to interest every prosecutor between Paris and Constantinople." The silence in the carriage had become absolute. Even the train's rhythmic clatter seemed to fade. "You stole that from my compartment." "As you stole peace from your victims. Justice has a certain symmetry." The Baron's hands clenched on the table edge. "What do you want?" "One final hand." Sophia fanned the notebook's pages, letting glimpses of the damning evidence flash before the assembled witnesses. "If you win, you receive this book and everything I have won tonight. If I win, you give me the letter." "What letter?" "Do not insult my intelligence. The letter you have used to threaten me since Paris. The letter that brought me onto this train." Murmurs swept through the watching crowd. Lady Marlborough's sharp intake of breath cut through the whispers. "And if I refuse?" "Then I walk into Vienna tomorrow morning and deliver this evidence directly to the Imperial Police, with witnesses to testify that you refused a fair contest to recover it." Sophia gestured at the assembled spectators. "These distinguished ladies and gentlemen have watched you lose 40,000 francs to a woman you expected to easily defeat. They have seen your confidence crumble. Do you really want them to see you flee from a final hand?" The Baron's face had passed through white into a mottled purple. His eyes blazed with hatred and desperate calculation. "One hand," he said through clenched teeth. "Winner takes all. Winner takes all." He signaled for fresh cards. A sealed deck was produced, examined by both parties, opened with ceremonial precision. Sophia cut. The Baron shuffled. Their eyes met across the green baize like duelists measuring distance before the first shot. "Draw poker," the Baron announced. 5 cards each. 1 exchange." He dealt with mechanical precision. No second deals now, no sleight of hand. With the entire carriage watching every movement, he dared not cheat. Sophia examined her cards without expression. King of diamonds, Queen of spades, 9 of hearts, 7 of clubs, 3 of diamonds. Nothing. A high card hand at best. Across the table, the Baron's face betrayed nothing. Years of professional deception had taught him to mask every emotion. "Exchange?" he asked. 3 cards." She discarded the 9, 7, and 3. The Baron dealt her replacements face down. "I exchange 1. He took a single card from the deck and added it to his hand. Sophia lifted her new cards with steady fingers. King of hearts, Queen of diamonds, King of spades. 2 pair, kings and queens. A respectable hand, but far from unbeatable. "Call," the Baron said. He spread his cards on the green baize. 3 tens and 2 fours. Full house. Sophia stared at the cards. Around her, the assembled spectators released their held breath in a collective sigh. "It appears," the Baron said softly, "that the tide has turned after all." He reached for the notebook. "Not yet," Sophia's voice stopped him cold. "I have not shown my hand." 2 pair cannot beat a full house, Countess. Even provincial players know that much." "Who said anything about 2 pair?" She laid her cards down one by one. King of diamonds, Queen of spades, King of hearts, Queen of diamonds, and the 5th card, which she had palmed from her sleeve in the moment the Baron reached for his victory. King of spades. Full house. Kings over queens, higher than 10s over 4s. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Lady Marlborough began to applaud. The applause died as quickly as it had begun. Baron von Klaus remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the impossible hand spread before him. 3 kings, 2 queens.
A full house that should not exist, that could not exist, unless the woman across from him had performed the same dark art he had practiced for decades. "You cheated." His voice emerged as a whisper, but in the silence of the salon carriage, it carried like a shout. "Did I?" Sophia gathered the cards with deliberate slowness. "How curious that you should recognize the technique." "I demand a new hand."
The Baron's composure shattered like fine crystals striking marble. "This woman is a fraud. She has stolen my property, and now she steals victory through deception." "Your property?" Lady Marlborough's voice cut through the tension like a surgical blade. "You mean this notebook filled with evidence of extortion and blackmail?" She had positioned herself behind Sophia during the final hand and had clearly observed the damning pages. "These are private business records." "These are records of human misery." Edward Marlborough joined his wife, his massive frame blocking the Baron's potential escape route. "I can read the entries quite clearly, Baron. Names I recognize. Friends whose sudden financial difficulties now make considerably more sense." Murmurs rippled through the assembled spectators. The Italian Count stepped closer, his ancient family name lending weight to his words. "My nephew is mentioned here, Antonio Veronese. He paid you 12,000 francs last spring. For what offense, I wonder?" "That is none of your concern." "Antonio put a pistol to his head in July." The Count's voice remained calm, but his eyes burned with terrible intensity. "His mother, my sister, has not spoken since. Is that sufficient concern, Baron?" The crowd shifted. What had been an audience at a card game transformed into something more dangerous. Witnesses becoming judges, spectators becoming accusers. "This is absurd." The Baron rose from his chair, seeking the authority of height. "You would take the word of this Russian adventuress over a German nobleman?" "I would take the word of evidence." Victor emerged from his corner, documents in hand. 3 years of investigation, sworn statements from 17 victims, financial records tracing payments to your private accounts. He spread the papers across the green baize where fortunes had just been lost and won. "Friedrich von Klaus, you are a criminal enterprise wearing a baron's coronet. And by morning, every authority from Paris to Constantinople will know it." The Baron's hand moved toward his waistcoat pocket. "I would not recommend that." Edward Marlborough's voice carried the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to dangerous situations. "Whatever weapon you carry, I assure you that mine is larger and closer to hand." "You cannot do this." Desperation cracked through the Baron's arrogance. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who protects me?" "I know exactly who you are." Sophia rose to face him, years of fear and shame crystallizing into cold fury. "You are the man who destroyed Stefan Ehrlich, who drove the Prague banker into the river, who attempted to extort 50,000 francs from me with threats against my daughter." She stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse hammering in his throat. "You are a monster who believed himself untouchable, and you were wrong." The letter. His voice dropped to a hiss meant only for her ears. "I still have your precious letter." "One telegram and your daughter's reputation is ash." Send it." The words emerged with absolute calm. "What?" "Send the telegram. Publish the letter. Shout its contents from every rooftop in Vienna." Sophia smiled, and the Baron flinched as though struck. "What is one old scandal against the avalanche of evidence in this room? My youthful indiscretion will be whispered about in drawing rooms. Your crimes will be proclaimed in courts of law. Which of us, I wonder, has more to lose?" Irene chose that moment to attempt escape. She had edged toward the carriage door during the confrontation, her emerald eyes calculating odds and possibilities. But Lady Marlborough moved with surprising speed for a woman of her years, blocking the exit with aristocratic authority. "Going somewhere, Madame Levasseur? Or should I say, Mademoiselle Dubois?" Irene's face went pale beneath her powder. "I do not know what you mean. I make it my business to know everyone worth knowing, and everyone worth avoiding."
Lady Marlborough's smile held no warmth. Irene Dubois, former actress, former mistress to 3 cabinet ministers, currently wanted in Lyon for jewelry theft and in Brussels for fraud. Those charges were dropped. Those charges were suspended, pending your testimony against certain powerful men. Testimony you never delivered, because you found more profitable employment with Baron von Klaus. The trap had closed completely now. Baron and accomplice, surrounded by witnesses, stripped of pretense, exposed in the flickering candlelight like insects under a magnifying glass. What happens now? The Baron's voice had lost all arrogance. What do you want from me? Justice. Victor gathered his documents with methodical precision. But justice takes time. For now, you will surrender the letter you used to threaten Countess Veriskaya and every other piece of leverage you carry in your luggage. And if I refuse? Then Edward Marlborough will restrain you while I search your compartment personally. The outcome will be identical, but considerably less dignified. The Baron stared at the faces surrounding him. German industrialists who had lost money to his schemes, Russian princes whose families he had threatened, the Italian count whose nephew lay in a Roman grave. He had no allies here, no escape, no leverage. From his waistcoat pocket, he withdrew a small brass key. Compartment 5. The hidden panel behind the mirror. Everything is there. Victor took the key and nodded to Edward Marlborough. Would you accompany me, sir, as a witness? With pleasure. They departed, leaving the Baron in the custody of the remaining spectators. The Italian count produced a length of velvet cord from somewhere and bound the Baron's wrists with the efficient movements of a man who had performed such services before. Sophia sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. 3 days of tension, 3 nights of fear, and now, in the space of an hour, everything had changed. You were magnificent. She looked up to find Lady Marlborough settling into the adjacent chair. I cheated. Darling, of course you cheated. Against a man who has cheated his entire life, it was practically a moral obligation. The older woman accepted a glass of champagne from a hovering waiter. The question now is what happens when Victor returns with the contents of that hidden panel. Your letter will be among them. I know. Half the passengers on this train will have access to it by morning. I know that too. Sophia gazed at the bound Baron, at his mistress held captive by aristocratic disapproval, at the wreckage of an empire built on secrets and shame. My daughter will face questions, difficulties. Perhaps some doors will close that might otherwise have opened. Almost certainly. But she will face them with a mother who refused to be crushed, who fought back against a monster and won. Lady Marlborough raised her glass. To fighting back. To fighting back. They drank as the train hurtled through the Austrian night, carrying its cargo of shattered pretensions toward the city of waltzes and whispered scandals. Victor returned 20 minutes later. He carried a leather satchel that bulged with documents, photographs, letters, the accumulated ammunition of years of extortion, evidence that would destroy Baron von Klaus and liberate dozens of silent victims. From the satchel he withdrew a single envelope, yellow paper, red wax seal broken and resealed, Sophia's name written in a hand she had not seen for 20 years. Yours, I believe.
She took the letter with trembling fingers. The words inside had haunted her for months, evidence of a youthful passion written when she was barely 17, addressed to a man who was not her future husband. Innocent words that social convention had transformed into dynamite. She could burn it now, destroy the evidence, protect her reputation and her daughter's future. Instead, she opened it and read the faded lines one final time. My dearest Sophia, I cannot sleep for thinking of you. The moonlight through my window reminds me of your eyes, and I am lost, utterly lost, to a feeling I dare not name. The words of a boy she had loved before duty and marriage intervened, a boy who had died in a cholera epidemic 3 months after writing them. She had kept this letter for 20 years, hidden it, treasured it, and allowed it to become a weapon in a monster's hands. No more. Sophia folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her bodice, against her heart. Some secrets deserved protection, and some deserved to finally rest in peace. Vienna emerged from morning mist like a dream of empire. Golden spires pierced the gray December sky. The Danube curved through the city like a silver ribbon, carrying barges and the reflections of Baroque palaces. Church bells rang across the rooftops, summoning the faithful to early Mass, their voices blending into a symphony of bronze and devotion. Sophia stood at the window of her compartment, watching the city approach. Her city now. The place where she would rebuild her life from the ashes of fear. The train had maintained its relentless schedule despite the drama of the previous night. Passengers had slept, or pretended to sleep. The Baron and Irene remained confined to their compartments under the watchful eyes of Edward Marlborough and the Italian Count. Victor had spent the remaining hours organizing evidence, preparing documents, transforming chaos into the orderly machinery of justice. Now, as morning light flooded through the frost-etched windows, Sophia felt something she had not experienced in months. Peace. A knock at her door preceded Victor's entrance. He had changed into a fresh suit, dark gray with subtle pinstripes, and his face showed the exhaustion of sleepless nights finally catching up with him. We arrive in 20 minutes. I know. The Imperial Police will meet the train. I telegraphed ahead from Salzburg. Will the Baron face trial? Eventually. There are complications, diplomatic considerations. His family connections will attempt to intervene. Victor settled into the chair across from her. But he will never operate freely again. His name is destroyed, his network exposed. The victims will have their measure of justice. Sophia turned from the window. What about the notebook? The evidence I stole from his compartment? Currently in my possession. It will join the other materials I present to the authorities. Your contribution will be acknowledged as the act of a desperate woman protecting her family. And the cheating at the card table? Victor smiled for the first time in hours. What cheating? I saw a brilliant player outmaneuver an opponent through superior skill and nerve.
You saw me palm a card from my sleeve.
I saw nothing of the kind, and neither did anyone else who values discretion over scandal. Sophia returned his smile, recognizing the gift he offered. Silence, complicity, the shared understanding of survivors who had bent rules to achieve necessary ends. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Return to Paris?" "Eventually. First, I must see this matter through. Testify at depositions. Ensure the Baron cannot wriggle free through legal technicalities." He paused, choosing his next words with care. "I also promised to write a report for my employer, Stefan Ehrlich's sister.
She deserves to know that her brother's death has been avenged. Will she find comfort in that? I do not know. Grief follows its own paths. But at least she will know that something was done, that her brother did not die forgotten." The train began to slow, steel wheels screaming against the tracks as brakes engaged. Platform signs flickered past the windows, announcing their arrival at Vienna Westbahnhof. "And you, Countess?" Victor asked. "What happens to Sophia Vereskaya now?" She considered the question seriously. 3 days ago, she had boarded this train as a woman fleeing destruction, cornered by a blackmailer, paralyzed by fear, willing to pay any price to protect her daughter from the consequences of an ancient indiscretion. Now she stood on the threshold of a different life, scarred. Certainly. The scandal would follow her. Whispers would circulate through Viennese drawing rooms. Some doors would close, some friendships would cool. But she had survived, more than survived. She had fought back against a monster and won. "I will find my daughter," she said finally. "I will tell her the truth about the letter, about the man who wrote it, about why I kept it hidden all these years." "That will be difficult." "Yes. But Natasha deserves honesty. She deserves to know that her mother once loved someone before duty and marriage intervened. That passion is not shameful, even when society insists otherwise." The train shuddered to a final halt. Through the window, Sophia could see the platform crowded with waiting passengers, porters, officials in uniform. Somewhere among them stood representatives of the Imperial Police, ready to take custody of Baron Friedrich von Klaus. "There is one more thing." Victor reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small envelope. "I found this among the Baron's papers. It appears to be a letter addressed to you." Sophia frowned. "Another piece of leverage?" "No, something different. I believe you should read it privately." He pressed the envelope into her hands and rose to leave. "Victor?" He paused at the door. "Thank you for everything. I would not have survived this journey without your help." "You would have survived. You are stronger than you know, Countess." "Sophia, after everything we have been through, you should call me Sophia." "Sophia." He bowed with old-fashioned courtesy. "It has been my honor." The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with the mysterious envelope. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, feminine, elegant, recent, judging by the freshness of the ink. She broke the seal and unfolded the single page within. Dear Countess Vereskaya, you do not know me, but I know you. I have watched your courage over these past days with growing admiration. My name is Maria Ehrlich. My brother, Stefan, took his own life 6 months ago after Baron von Klaus destroyed his reputation. I hired Monsieur Renard to pursue justice. What I did not expect was that justice would arrive in the form of a Russian countess with fire in her eyes and steel in her spine. I understand you have a daughter. I understand that protecting her drove you to risk everything against a dangerous enemy. I want you to know that such love, such fierce maternal devotion, is the most powerful force in the world. Stefan never knew that kind of protection. Our parents abandoned him when his secret was revealed. He died believing himself unloved. If you can teach your daughter that love transcends scandal, that family means standing together against the world, then something good will have emerged from all this pain. I will never meet you. I prefer to remain in the shadows, grieving privately. But I wanted you to know that you have given me hope. Hope that courage still exists. Hope that monsters can be defeated. Hope that somewhere a mother loves her daughter enough to fight for her. With gratitude and admiration, Maria Ehrlich. Sophia read the letter twice, tears blurring the elegant script. A stranger's gratitude. A grieving sister's blessing. Connection forged through shared suffering with a woman she would never meet. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it alongside the other letter, the ancient love letter that had started everything. 2 pieces of paper, 2 expressions of love, 2 reminders that human connection transcended the petty machinery of scandal and shame. The platform outside bustled with activity. Sophia gathered her belongings and prepared to disembark. Her luggage would be collected, her carriage would be waiting. The familiar routines of wealth and privilege would resume their comfortable rhythms. But she was no longer the same woman who had those routines. She descended from the train into the December cold. Vienna spread before her in shades of gray and gold, beautiful and indifferent to the small dramas of human hearts. Somewhere in this city, her daughter waited. Natasha, innocent of all the darkness that had swirled around her name. Natasha, who deserved truth and honesty and a mother worthy of her love. A commotion near the front of the train drew attention. The Baron, escorted by uniformed officers, descended to the platform in handcuffs. His face had aged decades overnight. The arrogance that had defined him had collapsed into something small and frightened. Their eyes met across the crowded platform. Sophia held his gaze without flinching, without triumph, without hatred. Simply acknowledgement that their shared chapter had ended, and that she had emerged victorious. He looked away first. Irene followed moments later, her emerald beauty tarnished by exhaustion and fear. She did not glance at Sophia. She did not glance at anyone. She walked between her escorts with the mechanical steps of a woman whose future had narrowed to courtrooms and prison cells. "Countess Vereskaya?" A young footman in her household livery approached with a bow. "Your carriage is waiting, madam. Your daughter sent word that she will meet you at the residence." "Thank you, Dmitri." She followed him through the crowded station, leaving behind the Orient Express and everything it represented. Fear, deception, desperate midnight gambits, the kindness of strangers who became allies. The carriage ride through Vienna's morning streets passed in contemplative silence. Soon she would face Natasha. Soon she would speak truths she had hidden for 20 years.
Soon the complicated work of rebuilding trust would begin. But for now, in this quiet moment between worlds, Sophia allowed herself to simply breathe. The letter rested against her heart, the ancient love letter and Maria Ehrlich's blessing together, paper and memory and the persistent human capacity for connection. She had entered this journey as a woman defined by fear. She emerged as something different, something stronger, a survivor, a fighter, a mother who would face any scandal, defeat any monster, endure any whisper for the sake of her daughter's happiness. The carriage turned onto the broad boulevard leading to her residence. Morning sunlight broke through the clouds, gilding the Baroque facades in transient gold. Vienna welcomed her home with indifferent beauty. Sophia smiled and prepared to face whatever came next.